Okay, let's see. Do you remember your grandparents?
My grandparents. Well, my mom's mother and dad. I barely remember my grandpa Varov. I know he used to come here once in a while with Grandma, and he would help Mother peel apples when she was canning or something like that. And the only time I ever rode on a buggy, Grandma and Grandpa they lived down there in that stone house across the creek there.
Mm-hmm.
Where the bridge is down here.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ran down and opened the gate for them, and I got to ride in that buggy up the hill. And then after Grandpa died, Grandma was pretty young, actually. She was in her 60s, late 60s. And we used to go down there at her house, and she would always put us to dusting, and dust the table legs real good. And I remember going down and seeing her. And then later on, they sold her house, and she took turns living with Mother and Uncle John. That was her two children.
Mm-hmm.
And she stayed with us in the summer and Uncle John in the winter. And she was short and heavy set, real good disposition, she got so she couldn't get around too good, so she was in a wheelchair. And let's see, our workers, we had 4, Kate and Prince and Maud, I forget what the other one was. And we had cows. We usually had about, I guess at the most we ever had was 8 probably. And then Dad, in the summer, he would buy steers over in Louisville, and he'd bring them home. They would drive them through the road here. And he would feed them out. He'd let them pasture in the summer, and then he'd feed them in the fall till they were ready to sell. He made money on them like that.
Mm-hmm.
And all of us learned how to milk.
So you had dairy cows.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then we had a separator, and we would separate the milk. You know, they had 2 spouts. The milk came out on one and the cream in the other, and we sold that cream. We had milk cans, we sold the cream to the market.
So did you have to go every morning? Did all the sisters go, or just some, to milk the cows?
We had to milk them morning and night. And one time she told me, she said, "Clary, did I tell you this?" She said, "You know what I used to do when I was a little girl?" She said, "When Mom would get the bottle fixed for you, she would say, 'Mom, can I take Clary the bottle?' Did I tell you this?" And so she said I would come in there and sit in the bed with you, and I'd hold that bottle and let you have so much, then I'd take so much. She said, "Now that's just what I got for getting bigger than you." I know the older sisters, they would have dates on Sunday night, and they wouldn't want the boys to know they were going to milk the cows, so they had to hurry and milk them before the dates came. And when they had their boyfriends, they would come in here at the front room, and they would play the old player piano, and they loved to sing. They were beautiful voices. And then the girls would usually give them something like homemade cake and peaches or something like that for dessert. They didn't go to movies much back then. And Richard and Sue and I always wanted to see when they had a new boyfriend, what they looked like. So we would go in that bedroom, and we would hide under the bed, and that door would be open, and we could peep in here and see them. And one time, Sue Ann thought, one night there was a new boyfriend coming, so Sue Ann thought she would go in here behind the sofa and get a look at him. And she thought they would go somewhere that night, but they stayed and they stayed and they stayed and they sang. And Mother, it was time for bed, and Mother couldn't find Sue Ann. And she came in here, she said, "Have you all seen Sue Ann?" And here she came from out behind the sofa.
What did you do in the summertime with your sisters?
Well, we'd go swimming and bicycle, and Richard had a bicycle. And so Rachel and I learned to ride that boy's bicycle. And Ruth was working at Washington, D.C. So Rachel and I took the bus, that's where she's married, and we went on a train and went out to Washington, D.C. to see Ruth. And she had an apartment with 3 other girls that worked up there. And I think one of the girls was on vacation, so Rachel and I stayed in her room. And every day Ruth had plans lined out for us to go and visit these different important buildings in Washington, D.C. And so Rachel and I, it was the hottest thing. It was August. And we'd get in that tub and take a bath because that was a treat for us. And one day we just reneged on what Ruth wanted us to do. We rented boys' bicycles because that was what we used to ride. And we rode all around through when she went with George.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, she told about, I don't know if she told you, she used to ride the bicycle. And she rode out to the highway. It wasn't a highway then, just a regular road. And George, and she was ready to turn around, and here George came driving down the road. And he seen Rachel. He kept looking at Rachel, and he ran off the road. Did she ever tell you that?
Yeah. And what did Grandma do? She go talk to him?
Grandma thought that he was coming off often. But he loved Rachel, and he made a hit with her. But when Rachel worked, oh, she was so generous. She was always so generous. And she helped Dad pay debts. And when Dad was about to lose the farm, Rachel helped. I don't think Richard Lottom remembers it, but I do. And she bought me my first coat. She bought me clothes. And she was always generous. I know one time she said, after they was married, she went to Sturt's and she bought this beautiful coat. I think it was kind of a dark red and had all lamb's wool all down it. She just loved it. I know she was pretty in that. And she took it home. She was so proud of it. And George says, we can't afford that. You have to take that back. Grandma Lewman was a whole lot like your Grandma Rachel.
Your Grandma Lewman?
Rachel has her ways. Grandma Lewman had 4 boys, like Rachel. And one died in childbirth and the other died when he was 4 with pneumonia. Dad was her oldest, and Uncle Buzz was about 2 years younger. And Grandma her husband, she lived in this log cabin up there where the Lewmans came from at the first. But then Grandpa built her a beautiful home, real modern. She was religious. She would always, every time a minister would come that was preaching revival, she would always entertain them, having to stay at her home. And she was like Rachel. She was very active in the church. And she was outspoken. She would say what she thought pretty quick.
That's like Grandma.
Yes. just like your mom. But she was a good woman like your Grandma was. A lot of people didn't understand her because she would kind of say what she thought. But I know what she was. I know what Rachel was. I loved her. And sometimes Rachel would say things to hurt my feelings, in the later years. And I didn't pay much attention because I knew that's just the way she came on, And she would call me and she said, oh, Clara, I'm so sorry I hurt your feelings. I don't know what made me say that.